Louis Amirpour's 2014 film A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night was touted as the world's first Iranian vampire western, chronicling the actions of a female vampire who attacks abusive men. She is an unconventional lead, donning a chador and speaking very little, making unsuspecting victims all the more surprised when she uses her vampiric abilities as she gives them what they deserve. A common theme in the film is the mistreatment of women at the hands of men, and the vampire uses her unassuming stature to lull them into a false sense of security upon meeting her. Through framing herself as just an innocent girl, she's able to subvert the narrative where a veiled woman is constantly reliant on a man as she uses her sharp teeth to kill them, holding power over them and making them afraid. Through her actions, she applies author Bell Hook's notion of oppositional gaze. Oppositional gaze is defined as a political rebellion and resistance against the repression of Black people's right to gaze, but I believe that can also hold true to brown female spectatorship as well, as they are both marginalized groups affected by the patriarchy. Historically, the act of looking is politically charged. Masters would beat their slaves for looking at them. A parent criticizes their child for looking at strangers. There is power in a look, and that power can be reclaimed by marginalized people. When she stares back defiantly at those who she has thwarted, she is utilizing oppositional gaze. Her power is exerted as she bites the finger off a local drug dealer after he comes onto her. She surprises him as he bites it off, symbolizing his castration and fears of losing one's masculinity that comes along with it. As she peers down at him and sticks his finger into his own mouth, it is clear who is in charge. No longer is he looking at her in a commanding fashion, full of confidence and bravado. Now he's cowardly and remorseful, and she stares back at him with an oppositional gaze, asserting her domination over him. She defies the phallocentric politics of spectatorship, resisting the patriarchal look. Another way in which the main character is an unconventional representation of womanhood is through her chador. It cloaks her body, making it so she is not necessarily displaying her female features. Fundamentally, chador is shown to be a choice, not something she is forced to wear. Even within the narrative, all the other women have minimal to no head coverings, making her expression of femininity through the chador a unique choice. As she glides past on her skateboard, it seems as though she's floating above the ground, the chador giving her the ability to move swiftly and intentionally. Rather than restricting her movement, it grants her the ability to fly, her swift mobility becoming an integral part of her characterization and adding mysticism surrounding the concept of her being a female Iranian vampire. The chador offers her a place of safety. The camera is unable to sexualize her as she becomes formless, as she refuses the scope of philic pleasure associated with the female form. Skating is often seen as a masculine sport, and she reclaims that space for herself and uses it for transportation. What arises is the West's preconceived notion regarding what women in chadors are allowed or not allowed to do, and the agency they hold in a patriarchal culture. Instead of not being allowed outside without a man, she uses her skateboard in the dead of night. The Couple in the Cage is a 1993 documentary based on a performance art piece centered around Coco, Fusco, and Guillermo Gómez-Peña as they dress up as members of the fictional Guantanamo tribe and travel around the world to be displayed in museums in a cage. It is a fierce critique of Eurocentrism and the harmful logic which accompanies it, though this is all told to us through a series of interviews where museum goers are asked about their thoughts regarding the experience of seeing two human beings trapped in a cage. For many, the Western point of view jumps out even when the guard is down, and the audience can gauge your reactions, often a combination of ignorance and arrogance. The Eurocentric gaze is emphasized to its fullest extent as Fusco and Pina intentionally wear garish and over-the-top costumes and face paint and performed fake rituals in a made-up language. They spend their days surrounded by Western objects, listening to boomboxes and watching television. In particular, Pina spends much of his time pacing around the cell while holding a briefcase, mimicking the valorized masculinity of the American businessman. There is a stereotype that indigenous peoples are stuck in time and unable to comprehend the modern marvels of music and television.
And things that he doesn't appear to understand, and that he seems to get some kind of recognition from them, even though he doesn't know what they are, like the TV set. Something about that fascinates him, but I'm sure that he doesn't know what it is.
This exemplifies itself through the surprise viewers had upon seeing their usage of such devices, with one woman asking if this was a mockery of the standard American households. American culture is constantly superimposed upon native groups. The ingrained colonialism that is deep-rooted throughout some of the audience members showed itself through the blasé manner in which they approached the subjects being in the cage itself, from trying to rationalize it to feeding them bananas as though they were in a zoo, donning with gloves to ensure they didn't catch any diseases from the Guatemala, who might as well be another species. The preconceived notions that the interviewees had of what a native person should look like also reared their heads, with one person asking why they were so white. And others participating in racial fetishism. Corbina Mercier is an art historian who wrote about the fetishization of the black man within the art world, but his concepts can be superimposed on indigenous groups. There is jealousy surrounding native people's sexuality. A woman's lack of a shirt could not be inherently sexual, whereas it's incredibly taboo in American culture. When Fusco and Peña began to allow audience members to pay to see the genitals of the male specimen, they play into foreigners' exotic fascination with indigenous sexuality, stemming from the fetishization that is often associated with non-white peoples. Their usage of art as an anti-imperialist statement had the purpose of exposing the prejudices that many people have regarding indigenous groups, and tried to subvert this notion through comparing their modern-day footage to historical examples, which shows a historical precedent associated with the display of indigenous peoples. They urge the audience to unthink Eurocentrism, as NYU professors Ella Shohat and Robert Stam have done in their award-winning book Unthinking Eurocentrism, to have us understand how European values are prioritized and emphasized over indigenous peoples, and how this logic can embed itself within our society, becoming normalized and shaping our worldview. They juxtapose the historical footage with modern. It is as they are telling us, look, nothing has changed. You need to take a long, hard look at yourself and ask why. To fully combat that mindset, we need to free ourselves from the binary logic associated with the other groups. While they are the third world, we are the first. While we practice religion, they are superstitious and worship false gods. Wherever there is an other, there will always be a way to demonize and dehumanize them. To fully remove this from our psyche, we must destroy this binary and treat others as human beings.